course, he liked to do what he's doing, but at the same time, when it comes time that he might be win it, he don't want to go in there and carry on what you have to do in terms of being the president. And so that's what I mean when I talk about a psychological, and maybe you might be able to provide some information in reference to individuals, those kind of case studies that you have in reference to from that perspective. You see, not necessarily to say that he ought not to be the president, etc. But you know, I think that's what we're trying to do, because it's such an unusual thing. I know my wife has said a lot about it. You know,
is that right?
Yeah. It's hard. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. CPoe6, and he's giving us some information in reference to a psychological interpretation of the election of 2016. And so, Dr. CPoe6, let's give you an opportunity to continue our conversation.
Right. I want to follow up on a question that you raised during the break, which is, does Mr. Trump really want to assume the office of President of the United States? And my thought is that there's a possibility that he really does not want the responsibility. At the same time, I think he does enjoy being in the spotlight. I think he does enjoy perhaps the challenge of becoming president, but whether or not he really wants the responsibility, I think is a very legitimate question. Now, I think there is evidence in my thinking that Mr. Trump has a significant self-esteem problem. As a matter of fact, I saw something by a psychologist just a couple of days ago that indicates that Mr. Trump may have a problem of malignant narcissism. Now, narcissism is essentially me loving myself more than anyone else. That's narcissism. As a matter of fact, it's based on a story of a prince by the name of Narcissus. And Narcissus looked into a lake and fell in love with his image and tried to embrace his image and drown. And so the outcome of narcissism we know is negative. In any event, I think that people who love themselves more than is healthy or more than anyone else, okay, I think that those persons have an inner problem of self-loathing, or have an inner problem of self-disgust, or have an inner problem of intensely not being pleased with themselves. Now, anybody, and another way of saying that is, if I have if I love myself too much, then I've got really a problem of self-hate in one degree or the other, okay? And people who don't like themselves, or who loathe themselves, who have negative image of themselves, these people consciously as well as unconsciously are going to sabotage and do things that will hold them back. And so I think that's consistent with your question about whether Mr. Trump really wants to be president. Okay? And so given the very likelihood that he does have a significant self-esteem problem and may be suffering to some extent from narcissism or loving himself more than he should, that I think sets him up to be self-destructive, whether he intends to be or not. And I think another evidence of a person who is self-destructive is that most people who are self-destructive are determined to have their own way, okay? Which is another way of saying if a person is self-destructive because they're struggling with self-hate, they are not going to be willing to listen to anybody. They're not going to be willing to acknowledge that another person has a better idea than they have. They're going to be insistent on having their own way. As a matter of fact, As you may know, I've been working in corrections for the last 3 years at a jail in a community not too far from here. And there's a high prevalence of persons who are incarcerated, who are in jail or in prisons, who have this problem of narcissism, who have this problem of being determined to have their own way. And of course, you can see that if I'm determined to have my own way, I'm going to run afoul of the law. I'm going to end up doing something that's going to get me into trouble. And it seems as if that Mr. Trump is constantly doing things, saying things that gets him into difficulty. And so your point is well taken. The question is well taken. Does he really want to become president?
I think
so I think consistent with the fact that persons who have a problem of low or very low self-esteem, they're going to sabotage their own future. They're going to do things that are going to get them into trouble.
You know, and to think that you talk about low self-esteem, you think that a person who has had the accomplishments, the buildings and all of that, I guess that means absolutely nothing, no matter how much money you have or what kind of situation you might be in. If you've got a mental attitude that indicates that you're going to have your own way, then it really doesn't matter how much money you have or how wealthy you are. Is that what we're saying?
Right. In other words, no amount of money can cause me to genuinely feel good about myself. No amount of good looks is going to cause me to genuinely feel good about myself. No amount of fame, no amount of power or influence over other people is going to cause me to genuinely feel good about myself. And so I believe that Mr. Trump, in all due respect, has a significant self-esteem problem. I don't quite feel that way about Ms. Clinton because, or Secretary Clinton, because if you look at her history, she's been involved in trying to help other people, children and women and people who don't have medical care. Given that history, I think the evidence is that she does feel good about herself. And let me just say this, people who don't feel good about themselves, they tend to be highly self-centered. They tend to pursue pleasure. They tend to pursue excitement. Most often, they're addicted to pleasure, and so I think that that lays it out in terms of I believe that Ms. Clinton has a better offers a better future for the country in general.
And so no matter how much money you have or whatever, you can still have self-esteem is not associated with wealth or money or fame or anything. It's that's one thing that's in you that no matter that nothing can erase it. Is that what we're saying?
Yes. And let me also say this. Only God can heal.
Hold it. Let's take this commercial break. Is this time for this commercial break? And we'll be back following this short commercial break.
Yeah, this is the last segment.
Okay, this is, this is the fifth show here. You know what I'm saying? So this is the last 10 minutes. Okay, yeah, well, okay. Okay, well, let's see, we want to pick up on that. Okay. Because I felt there was something good that was coming out of this, this last 10, and so we have 10 minutes. And, and that's the kind of information that I want. And that I felt that way. But at least I wanted somebody to hear somebody else. And when I saw you the other night, I said, I think Dr. Poe might be able to explain this whole situation to all of us.
Thank you.
It's not I'm trying to condemn him or anything like that, or create a controversy or whatever. But it just seems to me, that everything seems to be going all right. He's about to make a rise and something, and then he goes and does it. You know, I said, well, what in the world? So, yeah, so that's my impression. I don't think that the man want to be president of the United States. I don't think he's got time in a real sense to be president. Doing it in a negative sense. I think everybody sees it's obvious, you know, that something's wrong. You know, and so. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show today. We're talking to Dr. CPoe, and he's giving us some information in reference to the psychological interpretation of the election of 2016. And of course, Dr. Poe, we've got 10 minutes, and so let's avail ourselves of all of your knowledge and information in terms of trying to bring all of this together. Okay.
Persons who are narcissistic or who care more about themselves than about anybody else, and who don't have an allegiance to God, to pleasing God. These persons almost always are addicted to having their own way. And as a matter of fact, my belief is that if I'm addicted to having my own way, then having my own way has become the most important thing. As long as I'm making an effort to get my own way, and as long as I'm in some way succeeding at getting my own way, then I'm pleased.
I'm all right.
I'm all right. Okay? All right? Okay, so you could see how that's antithetical to listening. You can see how that's antithetical to being humble. You can see how that's antithetical to being submissive. So persons who are addicted to having their own way, they are most often arrogant. They're most often prideful. They most often brag on themselves. They most often have a much higher opinion of themselves than other people. And so there you have it. There you have it. As I said before, many persons who are incarcerated in jails and prisons have the problem of being determined or being addicted to having their own way.
In spite of the fact that they might be incarcerated simply because of that attitude.
Absolutely. 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 I mean, if I won't listen to anybody, that means I can't learn from the experiences of other people.
Okay.
Okay? And so there's the problem, I think, that we see evidence of in the two people who are running. Well, I don't really see that really in Secretary Clinton, but I certainly see evidence of it in Mr. Trump, in all due respect.
Yeah, I understand exactly, and I don't think we are trying to say something because of criticism or anything like that, but I think it's obvious to a lot of people that it seems that he might have it going in a real sense, and then he decides to go home and tweet or something like that, and say something that's negative, and then refuse to be corrected in reference to it. And so it seems to me that if the idea is to achieve that office and you're moving toward it, and just as you think that you're moving toward it, you decide to do something that would misdirect you, and et cetera. And so it might be, is there anything that might be pulling him toward that, but when he feels that it might be within his grasp, he decides to do something else to keep that from happening. That's that's the impression that I get, and I felt that way for the longest, and I just wanted to find somebody who had the kind of information that I might be simply looking for somebody to affirm or confirm what I'm already thinking, but that's what appears to me. And since most of us are so involved in terms of watching the television and finding out what's going on in reference to it, and one time the pendulum seems to be swinging his way, and by the time it seems to get there, he decides to go home and tweet or something like that. And I would imagine that that's quite confusing and in a real sense frustrating to some of the individuals that wish he would push forward. And I think that that's what we're seeing, we see being worked out continually.
Yes. And also let me just say that people who are narcissistic, who are determined to have their own way, they most often are vindictive.
Okay.
Vindictive, okay? They most often are prone to try to get even with other people.
Okay.
And so we see evidence of Mr. Trump's vindictiveness. Speaker Ryan said, "I'm not there yet," and Mr. Trump said, "I'm not there yet," when the opportunity came for him to endorse Speaker Ryan. So yes, I think that there's a problem there. There's a significant problem, and I'm trusting that that God, acting through the American people, will make the decision that I think that's really going to be good for the country.
Now, is there a solution for a person who might be faced with such a problem in their own lives? I mean, what can be done in order to rectify that situation, to make them come to an understanding that things ought to be different?
Right. Well, I think that surrender to God. God is the answer. He's the only answer to low and very low self-esteem. He's the only answer to self-loathing or self-disgust or a person not feeling good about themselves. God is the only answer. And He's created us such that unless we turn to Him, unless we find our salvation in Him, unless we find our healing through Him, then we continue to suffer the pains of low or very low self-esteem. It's very difficult for me to love other people if I don't really have the proper love for myself.
Okay.
I recall Oprah Winfrey said once, she said, I don't know about, I'm not an expert on racism, but all I know is that if you can't hate me unless you first hate yourself. Unless you first hate yourself. Okay. So I'm in prayer for Mr. Trump. I do pray for him. Okay, and I wish him the best. But I don't think that he's the man for the job of presidency at the present time.
And I don't think that he's a man that would like to be. I think he'd rather take the run and be successful in the run. But I don't think that he would.
Well, as president, you cannot have your own way.
No.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, you can have your own way. You've got to be willing to listen to your advisors and to other people who have a much better knowledge than you have. And so if you got a problem of not being willing to listen, okay, and not being willing to compromise, okay, then no, the presidency is not the job that you need.
That's right.
It's not the job that you need.
You like to run, but it's not. And running brings a lot of excitement and everything else about it, and it's entertaining, and et cetera, and et cetera. But when it comes time that the ballot, that the votes are counted, and the possibilities of you having to do what you have to do, see, you can't. You have to stay in the White House.
Absolutely.
Sit in.
you
got to stay there a while.
And plus, you got a schedule, and you got to follow the schedule. You got to be willing to follow the schedule, okay? Which is like following an authority outside of yourself, okay? So anyway, I feel I want to thank you for inviting me to come and to share in this way. It has helped me to crystallize my thinking about the situation, about election, about the presidency election 2016.
Yeah, well, I think I want to thank you, and we've got about a minute before this show ends for the day. But that's essentially what I wanted to do. After seeing that. About love and how persons ought to respect and the things that we've been talking about over the last 15 or 20 years. But I think that, and I guess that's primarily through those kind of conversations that I came to the conclusion that, hey, I got to talk to Poe about this, because you know this has been weighing on my mind, and every time it happens, I say, well, how did this happen? And now I know, yeah, I've got a fairly good idea that